Welcome to Harvey County Community Talk, a program brought to you by Harvey County Digital. Harvey County Community Talk, where everything we talk about is the only thing you want to know about local matters that matter. The voice of Newtonians, Hestonians, Waltonians, and everywhere in between. I'm your host, Lance Gormley. We are the only voice for local public community talk. Our guest today is Chad Frey. Chad is the editor of the Newton-Kansan, Butler County Times-Gazette, and Wellington News. Chad serves as on call as a juvenile intake officer for community corrections as well. Chad has worked for the Kansan for about 20 years, and the other publications they began adding about 3 or 4 years ago. Chad has been with community corrections for about 3 years. His hobbies include running, and is currently, which you might like to know, the world record holder for virtual 10K participation. He likes to collect Hot Wheels. He was born and raised in a small town in Iowa called Wellman. The town sat about 25 minutes south of Iowa City, home of the University of Iowa and the Hawkeyes, which I'm assuming you're a Hawkeyes fan. Yeah. Chad is married to his, and I quote, his smoking hot wife, and they have 3 children together. Chad and his family attend First Mennonite Church and have for more than 20 years. Chad has also served on various boards and volunteer positions in the community, including a full set of terms with the United Way Advisory Board, being 1 year as president. He's also served a full set of terms with the Salvation Army Advisory Board. Other boards have included the Newton Rebels, now the Sluggin Rebels, Big Brothers Big Sisters, Peace Connections, Harvey County Drug-Free Youth, and the short-lived Newton Express semi-professional football team. He is a 2008 graduate of the Newton Citizens Police Academy. That's a lot, Chad.
Well, I've been around a while, so.
Let's welcome Chad to the program. Chad, welcome to the program.
Thanks.
As we were talking about doing this interview, you're somebody that I will say was unplanned, because after just going in there to the Kansan, seeing the new building, talking to you a bit about some articles and just journalism as a whole, and I found you to be an extremely interesting person. And there was all these things that were coming up that I didn't know about you. And I thought, you know what? I want to use this as an opportunity to get Chad in here and have a conversation with you because, like I said, I think you're a horribly interesting person. And it's funny, we live in a small community, and a lot of times what people do that are extraordinary just go unnoticed. And I just thought that this would be a great opportunity for us to have a conversation so people in the community in Harvey County can just get to know who you are. So I really do appreciate you coming. To start this conversation, as we were discussing some things, you have a really interesting history. Your family has a very interesting history. And just knowing that at times I've tried to go through and look at my past and people in my family and stuff, it can get lost. Just with records and genealogy and things, but that's not the case with you. And I'd really, just for the audience, I think will also find this interesting, give us a little bit of history about your family.
Well, the immediate family, that would be my mom and dad, that now live in Newton. That mom was born in Nebraska. Luckily, she never became a Cornhusker. And she married my dad. They married in Iowa, but that was families coming together from Indiana, Nebraska, just all the upper Midwest. He spent 30 years driving a milk truck, and I love to say that I learned my work ethic while sleeping on the dairy floor at 3 a.m. on a Sunday morning. And that's because of the number of Amish folks that he had on his roads. They could milk the cow, but he could not get the milk before 12:01 a.m. on Monday.
Okay.
So we would sleep on the dairy floor on Sunday in order to pacify those folks. And then he would then go and turn around and do his full Monday on just a few hours sleep. I'm doing that all the time now.
Yeah.
But it's that Amish community. And so I grew up in and around the largest settlement of Amish west of the Mississippi River.
Very cool.
Right? And then my own family, when you take a look at history, my grandfather on my father's side, so it would be my dad's dad, he was Amish in Indiana.
Okay.
And we know about half of his genealogy because, when you take a look at the era, you're talking about an Amish girl who got pregnant out of wedlock.
Ooh, taboo.
Yeah, very taboo. So we don't know who great grandpa was, but we do know great grandma. And as we go back, I think the things that kind of went whoa when you found out about them. I'm a part of the Hostetler clan, which back in the late 1800s settled in Pennsylvania. And there was an attack of the Delaware Indians on the homestead. Most of the family was killed. There was one woman who, you can't get more Mennonite than this. I'm just telling you, because she was quite robust. She couldn't get out the basement windows, and she burned to death in the home during that raid. Father was, for all intents and purposes, taken captive and slave for a number of years before he escaped. So there's that in the history. And the wild part to me, the fun, interesting thing of that was that I went to a small Mennonite high school. It's now called Hillcrest Academy, but when I went, it was called Iowa Mennonite. And that's kind of the pipeline for a lot of these Iowans that you see in our area. We come down here to go to college, and don't go home. But at that high school, we always had to do a genealogy project, and we had to find an interesting story to tell from our past. And that occurred during our junior year. My junior year, we had a student teacher from the University of Iowa that was going to grade all of our projects. And luckily, I was the first person to present because I told the story of the Hostetler family and the attack. And it was fresh in my mind because we had gone to visit the home site within the last year or two prior to that. Told that story as it would occur, as you would expect at a small high school like that. About half, maybe 75% of the class proceeded to stand up and tell the same story. That teaching assistant, she wrote a lot of F's because she just couldn't believe that everybody had the same story.
Right.
The wild part of that was that our teacher for that class looked right at her and went, "Well, of course they all told that story. They're all my cousins." So,
you're like, we're coming from a small community here, lady.
The F didn't stand. So, but that's in there. And then if you go back a little bit further in my family history, you can find a guy by the name of Hans Zog. Hans Zog appears in the Martyr's Mirror, which in Anabaptist circles, everybody knows what that is. Non-Anabaptist circles, maybe not. But there's a great exhibit about the Martyr's Mirror at Kaufman Museum right now.
Very cool.
And the Martyr's Mirror documents martyrs from the Reformation.
Okay.
And Hans was a school teacher and a pastor who had the audacity to believe in adult baptism. And he was abducted, jailed for the better part of 10 years, and we really don't know sort of the finality of him.
And around what time period is that?
So that would be way back in like 1600s.
Okay.
So so we can go back that far. My dad's traced it back all the way back to our Swiss and German roots.
Okay.
I've done some DNA testing because I'm curious.
Yeah.
And we found a lot of United Kingdom and England in there. I think that's probably from my great grandfather, who we really don't know who he is.
Okay. So there's an element of your family experiencing religious persecution even before the inception of the United States.
Yes.
In my understanding of history, in a lot of ways, that was one main cause of our revolution was because they wanted to be free to worship the way they so fit.
when you look at this from the Anabaptist / Mennonite perspective, the persecution was going on in Switzerland, Germany. That's where it was happening. And there were two huge migrations. One, we came to the United States. We came to escape. That's where we came. The other, which is the most prevalent group in this area, they left and they went to Prussia, invited by Catherine the Great.
Okay.
And they were given the worst of the worst farmland because they were great farmers and they did exactly what was expected. They farmed it and they made it work. And then because of the pacifism during some of those revolutions that occurred over in Russia and Prussia, they became very unpopular because they didn't want to serve in military. And that's when they all started to pick up and started coming to the U.S. And when they came, they were coming into Kansas. There's a really wonderful book. It's actually a fictional book, but called The Lone Tree by James Yoder that goes over some of that. And they were coming here.
Yeah.
And some I call them the working teen Mennonites.
Okay.
Yeah, they came from Prussia to here to farm hard red winter wheat.
And that would have been mid to late 1800s.
Yeah,
Pretty much the inception of Newton.
yeah.
So
Yeah. Right before Newton became a Newton.
Okay.
So the construction of the old mill occurred because of the hard red winter wheat that they were bringing from Prussia.
Okay.
They're the ones, quite honestly, that made Kansas the breadbasket of the nation.
Yes. Yes.
I mean, it's just, there's no two ways around it.
Yeah, and especially this area because we have real fertile ground and can grow wheat real well, and amongst other things now as technologies progressed. But it's to me seems very interesting that even people in and amongst your genealogy found their way here, and then later on you found your way here.
Yeah.
And there was not necessarily a direct connection between that because you didn't come here because of family, correct? You came here and then family followed you.
Correct. I came because I had this idea in my head that I wanted to be a pilot.
Okay.
And as an Anabaptist, the absolute best place for me to pursue that was Heston College.
Okay.
And, there's histories there too. Heston College was founded by the old Mennonite church. It was founded by sort of my brand of Mennonites. So that's what I decided to do. It didn't take me long to figure out that probably wasn't what I was going to be.
Did you not like heights or?
No,
I've still never flown and I don't think I want to, but
it wasn't that. It was more along the lines of as I was on a final approach with my instructor, and it just wasn't going well. And in my brain was like, you got to get this right. If you don't get this right, if you screw up, people die. And when that entered my head, and it never left my head, that as a pilot, if I really screwed up, people are going to die.
Yeah.
And so then I started bouncing from major to major. And when I was looking at media, when I screw up, people get their feelings hurt.
And you can always print a retraction, like, I made a mistake.
When I screw up, that's what happens. People get their feelings hurt. I get a little egg on my face because I screwed up, and, we pick up and move on from there. Yeah. So I came as a student. Then my two younger sisters chose Bethel. While I was still a student at Heston. And then as I was evaluating where I was going to go to look at getting into media, namely radio, Bethel kept coming to the forefront. They didn't have it as a major, but what they did have was a student-operated radio station that didn't make me stay on campus for 2 years before I could get on.
Okay.
I could be involved right away. And I was actually involved with KBCU before I became a student at Bethel.
Okay.
And so I was like, we're doing this. And my sisters never left. I went back to Iowa for a couple years to start working in a newspaper. And then I was able to get a job in Hillsboro at another newspaper there. And 1 week to the day after I moved to Hillsboro to be a permanent resident of Kansas, my parents did.
Okay.
And so now we're all here. And then before it was all said and done, my grandmother moved here too. Okay. And she passed at about right at a year ago. She passed away, 102. Wow. Yeah. So that over time, people got real confused. There's a lot of people who think that I was raised here because my whole family's here, but it's not really the case.
That's kind of interesting. Just the fact that, of course, it's normal today more than ever before where children will move a place and they'll have kids and then mom and dad will follow just to be around kids and whatnot. And that's changed dramatically from history, which was sticking close to the family, and the things change with
Right.
that. Obviously, just have to do with what kind of work people do and where they can find that work. It's not everybody sticks to the family farm and keeps it running,
Right?
Because we used to be a huge agricultural country and state, especially. When you came here, kind of give me how you found your way to the Kansan.
Okay. Well, I found my way to Kansan. As a student at Heston and Bethel both, I read the Kansan all the time.
Okay.
It was, quite honestly, it was my favorite newspaper. And it's because I wanted to know what was going on. I wanted to know what was going on here.
Okay.
Right? So, you would walk into the library, you could pick up the Kansan, you could take a look at the Wichita Eagle. Wichita Eagle was mostly filled with AP wire from who knows where.
Okay.
And I'm not like some of the folks that are out there now today. I mean, I grew up with newspapers. I flat out, and as a high school student, I was reading 3 and 4 newspapers a day and always wanted to know what was going on in my backyard. So I read the Wellman Advance, the only newspaper to give 2 whoops about Wellman. There you go.
Yeah.
Which is now dead. And I read the Iowa City Press Citizen, Cedar Rapids Gazette, Des Moines Register. I read them all. Some of them I delivered. But so as a student in college, I read the Kansan. And then when I decided to embark upon my career, that was one of those places that I always was like, I bet it'd be great. I bet it'd be fun to work there. Just fun. But I needed a job, so I moved back to Iowa and took a job as a sports editor. That was difficult. I had to tell you, I don't know how Mark Schnabel does it. I just don't. Because I was at a weekly and I had 11 high schools and it about killed me. And the number one thing, it's another one of those kudos to Mark. It's one thing to go to a basketball game on a Friday night and just cheer your head off and love watching the game. It's another to go work it.
Yeah, having to, I can only imagine.
Yeah. It's not all fun and games when you're sitting on press row or behind the camera. And I was doing a lot of that. 11 high schools. I mean, the schedule was just nuts. And of course, we were in the infancy of the internet age at that time. And so since I was at that time a young guy, they were like, hey, why don't you do this? So I became the web editor and we were also in the infancy of using computers to do layout work.
Because pre-internet, pre-computer, where people got most of their information was from the paper. And so
or the 6 o'clock news at night.
Yeah. And when you're talking about something fairly local, like your 11 high schools, there's no way that you're going to turn on the news and have a rundown in most cases of all of your 11 high schools. So where people get that information is from a news source or a paper, right, and then even a local one that expresses that. So if you didn't cover it, most likely people did not hear about it.
Correct.
Outside of the people that were sitting there or word of mouth.
Correct. And you know what? In many ways, it's still that way today.
Yeah.
The casual sports fan, that all they want is the score. All they want to know is that Newton beat somebody 56-0 on Friday. Yeah. They'll get that on Friday night from Channel 10, Channel 3, Channel 12. They'll get that score.
Yeah.
If they want to know how that score got done, they're going to have to go somewhere else.
Yes. Yeah.
And, you know, you can go to Max Preps and you can get box scores or whatever else. But if you really, 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 really want to know, chances are you're going to have to go to a local newspaper.
Yeah.
The delivery system might be a little different than what it was like 40 years ago because of online.
Yeah.
But that's where they're going to get it.
Well, and I think it's just amazing. I mean, it's just kind of going down this road. I'm of the age, which I'm not, you know, old or anything, but I was able to experience a life with no internet, you know, and how you would get your information. And now we've just progressed to a point where it's at your fingertips 100% of the time, all the time. It's you know, you almost because it's digital, you don't even have to wait for it to be printed out in a lot of ways. You know, I'm not saying that the new is better than the old or anything, but it's just really interesting how we've progressed in a way that is almost entirely digital for a lot of younger people. You know, I mean, it's fairly just interesting to me. That's about the only word I can use for that. Moving forward, if I'm not cutting you off or anything about what we were talking about, the Newton Kansan recently moved locations.
Yep.
And I remember reading about that, hearing a lot about that. Of course, the building sold and all things that have happened since the decision to move out of that location. And there's a lot of things that I noticed about that, where before, didn't the paper used to be printed at that location? Or am I mistaken on that? Like 1940, 50?
Oh, yeah.
It was printed in that building, correct?
Yes. We did have a print operation. The Kansan was actually founded as a printing company.
Okay. That's a fun fact.
Yeah. And until about... And my brain's a little hazy on the time span here, but somewhere around 2005, 6, 7, 8, kind of right in there, we were printed in-house. We had a Goss community printing press that we purchased used. It was 40 years old when we purchased it. I believe we purchased it from Emporia. And we operated that thing like none other. And it wasn't only the Kansan that was being printed there. The Hillsborough Star-Journal, the Heston Record for a time, the Peabody Gazette for a period of time, pretty much all of those little weeklies in this area for at least a little while were being printed on that press.
See, that's interesting because to me, the way that goes is it goes from an individual's mind to their hand, then written, then it goes into print there. Mm-hmm. Once it's printed, then it goes to the hands of the people that are reading it, all under one roof.
Yep.
You know, that's really...
And the wild part of that is that there were 2 Goss community style presses in neighboring buildings in this city. Because the, is it Anabaptist World Review now? At the time, it was the Mennonite Weekly Review. They operated their own printing press for quite a while as well.
That's interesting.
But yes, so for a while, yeah. And, you know, quite frankly, corporate ownership is the absolute worst thing for any and all local media, period.
Okay.
This is a hard stop. Capital firms and venture firms that are purchasing media, and I mean all media, not just newspapers, is the absolute worst thing that can happen to a local media.
Is that because do you feel that that's stripping away any independent journalism that can happen, or?
It depends on the corporation.
Okay.
So some of your mass media companies that own a lot of the local television stations, oh yeah, they exert control over them.
Okay. Content.
Yeah. I have worked through the Newton Kansan. I worked in that corporate ownership mode for the better part of 20 years. And only twice have I been told what to write.
Okay. So I'm going to assume, because I'm learning as we go here, the Kansan was an independently owned news organization.
For quite a while,
Okay.
until the Stoffers came to town.
Okay.
And I don't know exactly when that occurred, but Stauffer purchased a whole bunch of newspapers in Kansas. He divested those to a group called Morris Corporation. That was a, quote, family-owned company, but it was still a large corporation that purchased a boatload of newspapers, radio stations, and you name it. You know what I mean? At one time, the Kansan was owned by the same ownership as WIBW.
Okay.
I mean,
So when you're thinking
that was
media,
when Morris. So I talk media. Morris then divested its print properties in Kansas to Gatehouse Media. Gatehouse Media then purchased Gannett Media and rebranded itself as Gannett Media. So it's just sort of this chain. So we've had corporate ownership of the Kansan for a long, long time. The reason that corporate ownership is so bad for local media, I think back to the editorial that appeared in the very last edition of the Rocky Mountain News. That was an amazing publication in Denver. And in that editorial, they wrote about how the suits, that's corporate, they'd walk in and say, we need to get rid of these guys. Business model's not working anymore. Well, it's your business model that's not working. And, we're journalists, so what are we going to do? We're going to ask questions. And quite honestly, I got really, really tired under some of our former owners, and I just listed a whole bunch of them, that it's like, you guys have got to cut. You got to cut. You got to cut. Why? We're making money. And we know we're making money. I mean, straight up, the Newton Kansan makes money. And the problem was always, well, we're not doing well in Jacksonville, Florida. Oh, well, then why don't you make cuts in Jacksonville, Florida?
I see.
Well, they're a bigger market,
Yeah.
so there's potential there. No, there's not.
Yeah. So instead of, instead of judging your paper or
Right.
or let's call it because you take ownership, your media, you are levied against the whole. So
Exactly.
something that's completely out of your control that has nothing to do with you directly then affects you
Right.
directly because of a business model that, in your opinion, is failing.
Right.
To service the needs.
Right.
Of
So
not only the
and it cuts both directions too, because then you would get calls. I'd gotten those calls. Hey, we're doing really well with this initiative here. We think you should do that. And I can't tell you how many times when I got that call, I would look at it and be like, I've been doing that for 5 or 6 years already. That's come and gone. Everything has a season.
yeah.
Its season is over here.
Yeah.
That's how corporate ownership of media is working. And the venture capitalists, what they've been doing is they've been buying up newspapers. And again, most of them actually profitable.
Okay, just a quick question.
Yeah.
Just to help me understand. Trying to think business model. Is there a reason why these entities are coming in and buying a group of papers? Like, you're the editor of multiple papers, right? So is there a reason why these companies are coming in and it's turning into group papers instead of like the Newton Kansan being its own entity? Now it's a company that owns not only the Newton Kansan but multiple papers. Is there a reason why those entities started doing that?
It's namely because with the environment we're in, there's very few one-offs to buy.
Okay. Is it because the overhead's too much? I mean, I'm trying to kind of understand
It's because the singular papers aren't available.
Okay.
So if you were to go to one of these ownership groups and say, hey, I want to buy, I mean, you can make one up, we want to buy the American over there. They'll look at you and go, well, we've got that. Yeah. But we also have these and we want to get rid of them all. And they're not interested in negotiating for the sale of one singular property. They want to get rid of their entire group.
Yes. So then that puts it in a situation where all those are tied so closely together that.
Now there are some good things about that. I just did the story on unemployment numbers again this morning. We're in the middle of a doggone crisis.
Yeah.
So it's very hard to hire. But if we're ever able to actually hire some people in places like Butler County, Wellington, McPherson, so that we don't have folks like me that are trying to go all over the place, there'll be some support there for all of us in that. I mean, I went through this just yesterday. I got handed a dummy for the Saturday paper, and I went, how am I going to do this? I don't have enough stuff. And so the very first thing you do is you turn to your wire services, the very thing that I don't want to use, right? Because people are buying local products for what's going on in their backyard.
Yes, I agree with that.
So, and I coined a phrase very early in my career at Kansan, and even before I was editor. And it was, we want to be all local on the front page. And if we need to go and get some state stuff inside, that's fine. National is going to cause me some heartburn. If we got international paper stuff in our newspaper, we have really screwed up. I mean, that's where I'm at. So the advantage of having that group is that on that day where I get handed a dummy and I'm like, how am I going to do this? I no longer go, how am I going to do this? I go, I've got a story. I know there's a story from Butler County that folks will be interested in, and I can put it right here. Yeah. And, we share a district court district with McPherson County. So here's something out of there that it makes sense for us to use it. And people will be interested in it. Not as many that are as interested in that headline about recycling being killed in Harvey County. Yes. But there will be people interested in hearing about what's going on
in our judicial district.
In their area.
Yes.
And so that's where the advantage of ownership of multiple properties in it comes from.
So taking the pro with the con, and still going down the path of the Kansan and the building and the brick and mortar location. The decision was to condense and move. Was the reason behind that just a lot to do with what the building serviced in the past no longer services the same needs?
So it was a confluence of events that led to us to the actual relocation. Something that a lot of people don't know, that building had been for sale for the better part of 10 years, maybe even longer.
Okay.
We didn't need it. We didn't need all the space in there.
Yeah.
When we shut down printing operations, however many years ago, that was sort of the first thing where it was like, man, we don't really, there's a whole room back there you don't need.
Yeah.
And then, as a result of corporates treating local papers the way they do, when I started at the Newton Kansan, my first day there in 1999, there were the better part of 35 employees in that building. There were 7.5 employees in the newsroom alone. Today, there are 4 in the building.
All together.
So through cuts, outsourcing things that we got to a point we just couldn't do anymore. Printing, for example, we just don't have people. So, and the other confluence of events sort of there for the move is that October 1st of last year, Gannett Media sold us.
Okay.
We are no longer owned by them.
Okay.
It's us. It was just almost every publication that they owned in Kansas. Almost. They still have the Hutchinson News, the Topeka Capital Journal, and a couple others, and I don't even know what they are anymore. What they no longer have, what we were caught in, is the Newton Kansan, the Butler County Times-Gazette, the McPherson Sentinel, the Pratt Tribune, Fort Hays, I can't remember the flag of the paper, Garden City, Dodge City Globe, all of them have been purchased by Cherry Road Media.
Okay.
At the time that Cherry Road made that purchase, they owned a total of 3 publications in Minnesota.
Well, and the ones you mentioned, and I might be missing something, but it almost seems like they all are relatively similar communities that they're wanting to get into. You're talking about your 20 to 50,000 population range in Kansas. I don't know of any that you mentioned that wouldn't necessarily fall into that category. And then their purpose and mission is the same, to cover, I'm guessing, local news. And that's kind of their bread and butter. There's nothing more that I dislike, just me speaking in here, is the lack of information that we can get from things that are happening locally. It seems like we have taken this turn in society general where we're so concerned with what's going on in Washington, D.C. We're so concerned with what's going on in Atlanta, Georgia, or you pick the state and the city, and somehow or another, because that's brought into our life, we think that directly affects us. And in all reality, it has little to no effect on us. What it has effect on us is our local city officials, our school board, and your state. That's kind of my cap, where I try to focus on what's happening in Kansas, and then what's happening in Harvey County, and then obviously regionally. I mean, we're all interconnected. It's Kansas, and Hays, and whatnot. But for what's going on at my local level, and it seems like that's getting harder and harder to find.
There is a concept that many of those smaller newspapers that we talk about have known from day one, that I think has eroded and been forgotten. And here it is. The closer to your front door that the decision maker is, the greater effect they have on your daily life.
Yes. And likewise.
There's just no two ways around it.
And likewise.
So, if you look at the city's Facebook right now, it's pretty safe to say that their decision that they're making about recycling is a massive issue for us.
Yes.
Well, those decision makers on that decision, they're all really close to your front door.
Yes. And there's an element of that that's rather interesting too, because the majority of people you could go ask, just talking about policy, and I know this to be the case, they can tell you who the governor is. They might be able to tell you who their state rep is, or maybe state senator. They could tell you definitely who the president is. They could tell you who Nancy Pelosi is. They could tell you who Chuck Schumer is. They could, and down the list. But how many people, if they were standing right next to their city commissioner or their school board member, would know who they are? And that just plays into this, what we're talking about. Mm-hmm. It's the fact that, I personally have gotten to know these people, so of course I would be able to point them out, but it's because I'm wanting to be involved, and then the understanding that all politics is local. We're running parallel here, not too much off of what you're saying, but the information that's also provided on what's going on. These people are tangible to us. They live in our community. They're our neighbors. They can be your friend. They can be somebody you don't like too. I mean, I'm sure there's some of that going on. But it's very interesting how they have a connection. We're talking about local paper and covering local issues and things like that are directly affecting us. Well, those people are right down the street too. they're in and amongst our community. And I think it's very interesting how, like what we're talking about with papers and media have progressed forward, continuing down that. When you chose to make the move, what was something that was a positive that you felt come out of that, and what was something that you felt was a negative that come out of that?
You're talking about the move of buildings?
Yeah, just moving buildings, because I came into your new spot and I looked at it and I think, hey, this is nice. It's not the building that the Kansan used to be in, but it serves its purpose, I'm sure. So what, in your opinion, what's some pros and what's some cons, or at least one of closing down shop there and reopening somewhere else?
The number one pro is a very intensely personal thing for me. So because of pandemic, first I was told I couldn't be in the office. All right. Myself and Mark. So there's four staff. Myself and the sports editor was told, you're not in the office. Work from home. And that's fine. Then, but every now and then there's something you need. So you, for a little lack of better words, you'd sneak in, right? Still got a key. But here's the deal. That front door is still closed. You're walled off from the public. Nobody's coming in. Nobody's talking to you. And so for me, walking in there, and it was very physically real, I would be doing this. And that is wiping away the cobwebs. Figuratively speaking. Because being in there, it was like being in a tomb. And I'm sitting in these empty rooms, and all I can think about is Medford used to sit over there. Chris used to sit over there. Kelly used to sit over there. Patricia used to work right there. Man, the conversations that she and I would have. Mentally, emotionally, that is difficult.
Okay.
And it's not being interrupted by Lance coming to sit down and have a cup of coffee.
Yeah.
So I was really, really, really emotionally happy to go somewhere else. Yeah. The Kansan had done business there for 94 years. 94 years. And there's 94 years of crap. And some of that crap is still in that building.
Yeah.
So 94 years of it. That also is the con, the 94 years thing. Because people are so used to, they've been going to that place to do business with that newspaper for 94 years. And those are habits that you cannot break overnight.
Yeah.
And quite honestly, I see that as really the only con. I was asked, where do you want your new location to be? And I was very blunt. On Main Street.
Yeah.
There is no other place.
Revitalize that downtown.
And they're like, what? I'm like, we have to be on Main Street. There is no other place, period. I won't accept anything else.
Yeah.
I won't go to another office, period. I'll work from home if I have to, but we have to be on Main Street. Yeah. And they obviously listen to me. Yeah. So that's the difference between our new ownership and some of our old ownership. They listen to me.
Yeah.
And when I say things like, I don't know how much longer I can do all three of these publications, they're like, okay, well, let me email you a job description. We'll see if we can get somebody hired. I mean, nice. Just completely different.
Very good. That's very good. I know we're going to change direction here a little bit, but we're not running out of time, but we're getting close. Something that's amazing to me when we were talking just about you personally is we talked all things paper, right? Okay. And we can continue to talk about the paper, and you brought some interesting stuff. I'm thinking from like an ancient newspaper that's printed. I want to see that.
This is the 50th
show
anniversary.
Me that.
This is our Newton Kansan 50th anniversary edition. The Newton Kansas very first.
Hold that up to the camera.
Yep. There you go. The very first edition of the Newton Kansas was printed on August 22nd of 1872. Wow. So Newton is founded February 22nd. And there's competing dates for the foundation of Harvey County, but it's somewhere right along this timeline during 1872. And the Newton Kansas came out in August. So we missed the big gunfight. Okay. So that's not there. But
our crazy sordid past.
Pretty much everything else is there when you and our the print archive that we have is massive.
Okay, I have a question about that. With your move and things changing, you're probably decreasing a lot of size, and I'm sure you have every last Newton Kansas article archived. So is that something that will be preserved through like the Historical Society?
We've talked to the Historical Society, the public library. I've talked to some local business leaders. We're looking for a place.
Wouldn't it be cool to have it in a library? I think that would be cool to have it in a library.
But again, when I say massive, it is physically huge.
Has there been anything to do with
this time? We really haven't found anybody who has space to take it.
Okay. Is there any hope to maybe digitally capture it?
If somebody wants to pay the price, I'm sure that could happen.
Okay.
But again, it's not going to be cheap. Newspapers.com has some of the early stuff.
Okay.
But it's huge. I mean, we're talking about, so the Newton Kansas was a daily. There was also the Evening Republican, which was a weekly that operated for quite a while out of the same building, same people. And so we have 150 years of newspapers, and most of that daily. So it's pretty massive.
It's interesting. I enjoy it. I enjoy what we're talking about. So I have a better understanding. I think our audience has a better understanding of the lineage with the paper and whatnot. But something that stands out to me is I have a deep respect for anybody that volunteers in and throughout my community. Okay. In fact, oftentimes I've made the comment, when listening to what people have to say, what are you doing about it? Where's your skin in the, where have you put your skin in the game at? What have you volunteered for? What have you chose to do to make your community better as a whole? Okay. And you have quite a list. Okay. I mean, you really, really do, Chad. You have quite a list of all these places where you've served and volunteered your time to make your community better. So without listing all of them, why? Just tell me why you do it.
If I don't, who will? There's that to it. And quite honestly, I've really tapered back since I had kids. There's that old adage, if you want something done, ask the busiest person you know. I've always been the busiest person.
Yeah.
Always. But when you look at the organizations that are there, by and large, they're all really dedicated to making your community a better place. And several years ago, the United Way was making one of its promotional videos, and it asked each member of the board to write on a chalkboard why they were on the United Way board. And then they basically used a photo of that and put it in the video. I wrote to make Newton the greatest place on earth. I already believe that Newton is about the greatest place on earth.
Yeah, I do too.
We're
Newton lovers,
It sounds really Pollyanna, but you know what? I chose this place.
Yeah, this is my home.
Okay, and one of the things that I have run into living here that frustrates me the most is the disrespect people throw at me because I wasn't born here. So what?
Yeah.
I chose this place.
Yeah.
And I continue to choose this place. You know, being editor of the Butler Times Gazette is a new thing for me, and I was forced to do it. They offered me the publisher's role down there several years ago, and that's significantly more money. I said, no, I'm not going there. I'm a Newton, and I want to be a Newton.
You're a Newtonian through and through.
And, you know, I mean, I didn't even have to change my school colors, man. I mean, seriously.
People walk around a distance.
Yeah.
It's a Newton shirt.
I didn't. I had to change my school colors. But, so I chose Newton, and I've always, and it goes back to sort of that Mennonite ethos. You got to work to make where you're at a better place.
Yeah.
And again, it sounds Pollyanna, and it's a statement you hear a lot, but it's really the truth. You serve God where you're at.
Yeah. You know, my dad used to tell me something, and it was something he said repeatedly. And it was, you don't have time to complain when you're working.
Right.
You don't have time to look at what other place or what grass might be greener on the other side if you're busy tilling your field. So that is a life lesson in so many different areas of your life. You're not worried about what you're missing if you're focused on what you got. I just had to say that because there's something that we come together on, you know.
And of all the places to be really challenged about it, the Tullagall Social Club, Belfast. I went there for 10 days on sort of called a peace building mission. I was meeting with guys from the IRA and the UDA, and they hate each other. Yeah. And one of them looked right at me and says, "You doggone American, you got to get your own house in order before you come over here." And I looked right at him and I went, "Well, I've been working with the Salvation Army and the United Way, and I, just listing the things that I do for the community." And he looked at me and went, "Oh, so you are doing it?"
Yes.
"Yeah, I am." And he goes, "Okay, well, in that case, thanks for being here."
Yeah.
That's very much an upfront, right?
Yeah.
And
that's real talk.
And that's very real.
Yeah.
Because you're sitting with a guy and you're like, "So tell me about that guy over there," and he'll look at me and say, "Well, I know him as," and he'll give you a number. And he was on my hit list 3 months ago. I just didn't get him. That's the guy looking at me saying, "Get your own house in order before you try and come and fix mine." Yeah. So that's pretty real.
Yeah, that's real. That's where I these phrases. That's where the rubber meets the road. Mm-hmm. You know. So we are coming up on the end. I could talk to you all day long. I know this. We're going to have many awesome conversations going forward. I know that, Chad. I really appreciate you coming here today. I wish we could cover more. I appreciate everything you do in the community. Keep chucking away at it, because, you know, there are those of us that do. There are those of us, and I know a lot of them, and you're one of them, that focus on what we can do to make Newton better, what we can do to make Harvey County better, what we can do to focus in and provide a better future for even our kids and going forward. I mean, I don't know what your hope is. My hope is that my children decide to call Newton home. I hope that we've built a home for them, for their future, for them to want to be here. So you're awesome.
Well, when I was president of the United Way board, they came to me and said, "We would like to investigate the Dolly Parton Imagination Library." And the one thing I said was, "Why? What's it going to do to make Newton better?" And when they said what it was going to do, I said, "We're all in." Yeah. I mean, it's just, you know, they wanted me to take that to the board for a decision. And I just said, "Yeah, we'll go to the board for a decision, but understand I'm coming out with, we're all in on this, folks. Yeah. We're going to do this."
There's no reason to do anything half-assed.
Right. Yeah. And so it was just make this town a better place.
if there's, just to give you the closing statement, or is there a quote, a statement, a piece of wisdom, something that you want to tell everybody who's listening right now? You got the floor.
Well, since I came here and was sort of invited because I'm editor of the Kansan. The very first editor of the Kansan's name was H.C. Ashbaugh. His very first job in newspaper was almost exactly 2.5 hours due north of where I was born. And then he came to Newton to found a newspaper. And he was quite a guy. And I can go on about him for quite a while. But he wrote something that I hold very near and dear to my heart. And here it is. We do not believe every Democrat to be a dishonest man, nor every Republican an honest man. Far from it. Our mission among you is not to be that of a political organ. He continued with, a mere political organ is a stupid, vicious thing that has no right to be. That's the foundation of the publication that I work for.
That's awesome. Well, thank you for listening to this week's program. Good day, good night, or good riddance. Either way, we hope to catch you again during our next program. Tune in or tune out. The voice of Newtonians, Hestonians, Waltonians, and everything in between. I was your host, Lance Gormley. We are the only voice for local public community talk.